Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining me. Let me see. We've got a few minutes before we begin. Let's see who's joined us. Thank you again for coming, Vincent. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Chung, Kiara. Oh, Apple Zheng Yang, thank you very much for coming back, Apple Zheng. Very nice to see you again. Still more people waiting, okay. Well, the numbers are building up all the time. It may take another 2 minutes before we start. I am, as you guessed, still in Dubai. The weather's very nice. I'm trapped in my hotel. Police are stopping people on the street who are walking along without shopping bags because they're obviously not going to buy food. Hello, thank you very much. Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Marina. To all those of you who just joined in the last 2 or 3 minutes, it would be very useful if you could try and join 3 or 4 minutes before the lesson so we can start at exactly the appointed time. Okay, let's start. Well, we're going to look at 3 topics today. The first one relates to writing in general, business writing and legal writing. Legal writing, you know, is about communicating. It's not about showing how clever you can be. It's not about showing how many Latin words you know or how many long words you know. It's about the difficult job of explaining complex ideas in a manner in which the reader can understand. The scientist Albert Einstein said that one particular kind of genius is the ability to explain a complicated idea in a simple way. And that's what legal writing is about. Every day we have to explain complicated ideas to our readers. They may not be lawyers, which makes it exceptionally difficult. They may be lawyers and we're dealing with very technical legal points. The thing is, what we're trying to explain is usually never very easy. So, 2 things you must keep asking yourself in everything you write, whether it's business writing, writing in your own personal life, and in a legal writing. And that is, keep asking yourself the question, can the reader understand this? And second, how can I help the reader understand this? Well, welcome to lesson 3, everyone. Thank you for those of you who've already taken some other lessons and you've come along today. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you with regard to communication relates to punctuation. Punctuation isn't a luxury. Punctuation, commas, full stops, colons, semicolons, question marks, brackets, em dashes, they're essential aids to understanding the meaning of the words in the sentence. And in particular, the comma, that tiny little piece of punctuation, is exceptionally dangerous. Overused, it can completely change the meaning of your sentence. Now, the presentation I'm going to show you was written by a colleague of mine from Egypt some years ago. She wanted to be deliberately provocative because she was posting it on the internet. So the message you're about to see wasn't written by me, but stick with it. I'm not trying to be rude, as you'll see in the slide after that. What I'm trying to show you is how punctuation can completely change the meaning of the words in the sentence. Let's start off with this. Comma is an essential tool and a danger to those who don't know how to use it properly. In particular, we're going to look at using what are called restrictive and non-restrictive adjectival clauses. These are the phrases or clauses in a sentence which are caused by the overuse of commas, where one extra comma changes the meaning of the sentence. Very difficult, very dangerous in our contract drafting. So let's have a look at what my colleague wrote. Don't get annoyed, ladies. All the men in the class are looking at the screen and reading this sentence, which has no punctuation in it, other than the full stop at the end. And what they're reading is, a woman without her man is nothing. That's how they see it. They're men. That's how they see it. If they were asked to punctuate it, they'd put a comma after woman and a comma after man, making it even more offensive to the women in the audience. However, the women in the audience are looking at this sentence, and what they're seeing is they're punctuating it like this. A woman, without her, man is nothing. Now you can see the total change in meaning by the use of punctuation. And in particular, notice that little comma after her. So punctuation is powerful, can greatly change the meaning. Without punctuation, words don't convey their intended meaning, or may not convey it fully and reliably. So look at this. Her book dedication read, "To my children, Sarah and Chris." Fine, she has 2 children, the book is dedicated to them. Let's put a comma after the word Sarah and see how it changes the meaning. Her book dedication read, "To my children, Sarah and Chris," meaning her book is dedicated to her children, however many there may be, and to somebody called Sarah and somebody called Chris, who are not her children. So now, rather than 2 children, one party of 2 children, now it's 3 separate parties. Her children, however many there may be, somebody called Sarah and somebody called Chris. And that meaning has all been changed because of one comma after the word Sarah. Or what about this? And here we're going to look at non-restrictive adjectival clauses. Non-restrictive clauses, we'll call them. Peter insisted Marie stole the car. So the next morning, Peter's at the police station and he's telling the police, it was Marie. It was Marie that stole the car. And look at the second sentence with the commas. Peter, insisted Marie, stole the car. Now it's Marie that's at the police station and she is insisting that it was Peter that stole the car. You can see the total change in meaning that's come about for the use of the 2 commas. Or this, same idea. Mark said his manager was suffering from depression. Or Mark said his manager was suffering from depression. Now it's Mark that's suffering from depression. Total change in meaning by the use of 2 commas. Now, this is very dangerous for contract drafters. We often put a comma in, what's known as an Oxford comma, where there'd be a natural pause if we were reading the sentence out loud. But be careful of doing this in contracts, because as you can see, when you put a second comma in, you turn the words in between the 2 pieces of punctuation, the 2 commas, into what is called a non-restrictive adjectival clause, which means it can be removed from the sentence and the main meaning of the sentence remains the same. Like this. Mark, let's go to the second sentence here. Mark was suffering from depression. That's the main message, isn't it? And who says so? Well, it's his manager. Now, why is this important? Well, in a court context, when they're interpreting contracts, their role is to understand and give effect to the intentions of the 2 parties in the contract as they've written it in the contract in nice, clear language, and to fulfill their reasonable expectations of what's going to happen under the contract. Now, interpretation rules say that the paramount rule of interpretation is the golden rule, also known as the literal rule, which means that words must be given their ordinary, natural meaning. That means basically that if the sentence makes sense, the judges must apply whatever meaning it has, even if they don't like it. If the meaning is not clear, however, then the judges can look to other things to help them understand it. And the first thing they will look to is punctuation. So punctuation has a very important role to play in writing legal documents. Where the intention of the parties is not obvious, punctuation can be relied upon. So punctuation in contract drafting and legal document drafting is not a luxury. It's an essential guide to the judges so they can understand what the sentence means. Now, I want to give you an example. There are quite a few cases. You won't have heard of many of them, but here's one from Canada. Case of Rogers Telecommunications Incorporated and Alliant, known as Rogers and Alliant, First report in Quebec, 2006. What happened here was Rogers Communications provided services for radio and TV companies. And they managed to win a contract to provide services to Alliant, which is a radio and TV company in Quebec. Took them a long time to win this contract, and they'd have to invest quite a lot of money in buying material and training people during the course of the contract. So the contract was to provide about $250,000 of services each year. And in order to make sure they made enough profit to make it worthwhile, they told their contract drafter, tie Alliant into the contract for 5 years. Ask them to sign for a 5-year term. Then, when that 5 years is up, offer them a second 5-year term. But as we will have already made a profit by then, you can allow them to terminate the contract in the second 5-year term by giving 1 year's notice in writing. Here's what their lawyer wrote. This agreement shall be effective from the date it is made and shall continue in force for a period of 5 years from the date it is made, and thereafter for successive 5-year terms, unless and until terminated by 1 year prior notice in writing by either party. Well, at first sight, that looks fine, doesn't it? What's the problem? Well, the problem is the second comma. After the word terms, 5-year terms, comma. Because by inserting that second comma, turn the words in between the two commas into what is known as a non-restrictive clause. In other words, it could be taken out of the sentence and the main meaning of the sentence remain the same. So let's see what happens when you do that. Alliant were not happy with this contract. They weren't happy with the way Rogers performed. So they looked for a way out. They terminated the contract early. When Rogers sued, they said, the contract allows us to do this. Let's read this clause now with these words in between the two commas taken out. It says, this agreement shall be effective from the date it is made and shall continue in force for a period of 5 years from the date it is made, unless and until terminated by 1 year prior notice in writing by either party. In other words, right from day number 1 in the first 5-year term, Alliant could give notice to terminate the contract. Now, they were not happy. They did terminate the contract. The case went before the Radio and Telecommunications Commissioner for Canada, who said, yes, quite right. Although, for other reasons, the case was overturned on appeal, shockwaves were sent all across North America, not only through Canada, but through the US. On understanding, the lawyers began to realize we must learn punctuation as an essential part of contract drafting. So think very carefully before you add or remove a comma. And now I want to show you something. It's an old legend. I don't know if it's true or not. All about the use of a comma. I hope this story is true because it's a nice story. The Tsarina, Maria Fyodorovna in Russia, once saved the life of a man by moving a single comma in a warrant signed by her husband, the Tsar, Alexander III. He had exiled the criminal to imprisonment and death in Siberia. What he'd written at the bottom of the warrant was, pardon impossible, comma, to be sent to Siberia. Well, she felt very sorry for him, so she moved the comma until it was after the word pardon, and it wrote, pardon, impossible to be sent to Siberia. The criminal was set free, his life was saved. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it's a lovely legend and I like it very much. And it also shows you the power of commas in writing. Now, I want to show you how you can affect a contract. Look at these two sentences at the top of the screen. They look very, very similar. I'll give you a minute to read them on your own. I'll read them out loud, in fact. The store honored the complaints that were less than 60 days old. Second sentence, the store honored the complaints, comma, which were less than 60 days old. At the end of that sentence, there's a full stop. Now, with a restrictive clause, which actually affects the meaning of the subject, which has already appeared in the sentence. That would be the store. You don't use any punctuation. You just put a full stop at the end of the sentence. Where you mean to add a bit of information that's not essential to the main meaning, you will add punctuation and you will begin the phrase that adds the non-essential information with the word which. When you're adding information which is essential, you begin it with the word that. So in the first sentence, what it means is the store has received a large number of complaints. Some of the complaints are more than 60 days old, and some are less than 60 days old, and the store is only going to honor the complaints that are less than 60 days old. In the second sentence, what it means is the store has received complaints, and all of them are less than 60 days old. And the store is going to honor all these complaints. The main message is the store honored the complaints. That's the main message. It honored all the complaints. And by the way, they all happen to be less than 60 days old. So it's not only a different legal situation, it's a different factual situation. All of which is brought about by the use of the comma and changing the word that to the word which. Now imagine the effect of this in a contract. It's very dangerous. The comma, that tiny little piece of grammar, of punctuation, that tiny little piece of punctuation is incredibly dangerous. So, as my colleague said, think very carefully before you add or remove a comma from a sentence or from a contract clause. Let's have a little exercise. Let's have a look at this first sentence. Students who have young children are invited to use the free daycare center. Well, can all students use the free daycare center, or is it restricted just to those students who have young children? Is it restrictive or non-restrictive? Let's have a look at your answers. Is it R for restrictive or NR for non-restrictive? Restrictive, great. Well done, Tuka. Well done, Adriano. Applegate, excellent, Chiara, excellent. Very good, you got the point. Now, what about number 2? I left my son at the campus daycare center, which is free to all full-time students. Well, does that in any way restrict who can use the campus daycare center? Is there anybody that's not allowed to use it? Is it restrictive or non-restrictive? You'll notice there's a comma in front of it, and the phrase begins with the word which. Let's have a look at your answers. Non-restrictive, well done, Applegate, Chiara. Yeah, Munia, excellent, very good. And what about one more? John Wayne, who appeared in over 200 movies, was the biggest box office attraction of his time. Is that restrictive or non-restrictive? Is it just a bit of information about John Wayne, or does it restrict which John Wayne we're talking about, or somehow restrict the meaning of the word box office attraction? Let's have a look at your answers. Now, it's non-restrictive. Why is it non-restrictive? There's a comma in front of it. It's just a bit of extra information. There's a comma in front of it and a comma behind it. We look for punctuation in front and behind. That's what turns it into non-restrictive. So John Wayne was the biggest box office attraction of his time. That's what the sentence means. And by the way, he happened to appear in over 200 movies. So it's just a bit of extra information which isn't essential to the main meaning of the sentence. The reason I'm getting you to practice this is so you can use it when you're drafting contracts. Now, grammar. I want your writing to stand out. I want it to be better than those of your colleagues, your contemporaries, your rivals. I want you to have a reputation for writing effectively, especially in litigation, which is all about persuasion. You're always telling a story. Litigation is all about a story. There must be a theme in the story. Now, how can you tell your story effectively? Well, keep it short, keep it sharp. Use the words, strong words, to hold the attention. But here's a trick. for use in legal writing, in correspondence, as well as negotiations, as well as court texts. Here's a trick to grab the attention of the reader. What you're going to do is you're going to make an impact. You're going to use a colon. You can see that the colon is 2 full stops, one on top of another. Now, the best writers view punctuation not only as a shield, but as a way of polishing their writing, giving it greater dramatic effect. In other words, a sword to poke the reader. Now, correct punctuation, of course, is essential. You don't want people writing in and saying, you don't know how to write. But when we're at our very best, we can use the punctuation to sharpen up a story, sharpen up our writing. Now, as it says here, case in point, 2 full stops, one on top of another, that's a colon. The colon isn't for use just in front of making a list. Colon is a great dramatic device for you to use when emphasizing important information, emphasizing important points. Too many writers just use it to introduce a list of things. How boring. It's much better than that. It's like a little firework. It's a giant pause for breath. And then you make a big impact. Right, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to show you some sentences before there's a colon, and then written after we use a colon. Now, first, let's have a look at the general grammar rules for using a colon. First, there must be a complete sentence in front of the colon. In other words, you're using the colon rather than a full stop. Now, the colon itself must act as an arrow, pointing to the information which follows it. Right. Sometimes writers break that rule, as I did in the slide before this. Case in point. That's not a full sentence, but nobody really noticed. But usually, make a full sentence in front of it, and then the colon is an arrow, pointing to the information which follows the colon, which can be anything: a word, a number, a sentence, a phrase, a set of numbers. But whatever it is, it must explain something about the information in front of the colon, in the sentence in front of the colon, right? So the colon's the arrow pointing to the information which follows it, and the information which follows it explains something, some piece of information in the sentence in front of the colon. Right. Now, that doesn't sound too interesting, but let me show you some sentences before and after. And I want you to practice this in your own writing. Here's a sentence. It looks fairly dramatic as it is, quite frankly. The sole reason for the bank's misconduct was greed. Okay, it's quite dramatic, isn't it? But now let's rewrite it with a colon. You tell me which one has the greater impact. There was one reason for the bank's misconduct: greed. Which has the bigger impact? The one in red, I think. What about this? Did you sense the difference? Did you see the pop, snap, crackle, pop, like Rice Krispies, move around in the bowl? We want your writing to be as interesting as this, as fascinating as the cereals moving around in the bowl is to young children. Let's try another one. Now, in this case, a woman has fallen over a paving stone on the pavement in the street. It's the city council's duty to maintain these, and because she injured herself, she's suing the city council. The city council's lawyer could have written a sentence like this. It's grammatically correct and it's factually correct. The lawyer has said, the single event leading to this lawsuit was the plaintiff's failure to exercise reasonable care in watching out for dangerous conditions while she was walking. Well, yes, that's true. But it's rather bland, isn't it? If I wrote several pages like that, you'd start to fall asleep. So let's rewrite it in plain English, which we've looked at already, and we'll use the colon. Now you see what the effect is. The plaintiff fell for one reason. She didn't watch where she was going. Which is going to affect the jury or the judge more? I would say the one in red. All it takes is a bit of thought and practice in using the colon for dramatic device. Now, you may or may not know that the leading authority on legal writing in the entire world is generally acknowledged to be Professor Brian Garner, who teaches at several universities in America, top law schools. Now, Brian Garner, you may have noticed in this red sentence, I used a contraction. Generally, in legal writing, never use contractions. Did not, rather than didn't. However, when it's litigation or arbitration, which is all about telling a story, what happened, how it happened, why we are the ones that are blameless, why the other party is the one to blame. When it's all about telling a story, you can use contractions. Brian Garner says so. He's the world's leading authority. It's not just coming from me. Did you even notice the contraction? She didn't watch where she was going. Tightened up the writing a little bit, didn't it? Rather than saying she did not watch where she was going, she didn't watch where she was going. Better, it's more dramatic, it's more effective. Now, what about this? Sounds dramatic as it is, isn't it? The fire escape was the only way out of the building. Wow. Let's rewrite it using a colon, see if we can make it even more dramatic. There was just one way out, the fire escape. Would you agree with me now that the colons are a dramatic device? All it takes is a bit of thought when to use them. No writer, no professional writer, writes something and then just says, right, that's it, I finished, issue it. They don't. They sit, they look at their writing, they change a word here or there. They might change the punctuation. They'll polish their writing. They're becoming editors of their own writing. That's what turns ordinary writing into good writing. You cut out unnecessary words, you strengthen some of the words, you change a word here or there, you might change the sense or the order of the information. That's what separates good writers from great writers. I want you to be the editors of your own writing. Don't just write something and press the button and send it straight away. Write it, put it to one side for 2 or 3 minutes if you have time, look at it again and see if you can improve it by cutting out a word or two, or using something like this dramatic device occasionally to give it more impact. Now, some writers love M dashes, these long dashes. Rather than a colon, they'll put a long dash. And that's great. If you're sitting there thinking, shall I put a colon or shall I put a long dash? That's wonderful, because what you're doing is you're sitting there trying to make your writing more interesting, give it more impact. That's exactly what I want. It's that will lift your writing beyond that of your colleagues. It's that will get you noticed at work. It's your writing that will get you noticed at your work, get you advanced quicker than your colleagues. Lawyers tend to forget. We achieve what our clients pay us to do. Normally we write. Well, we write to the court, we write to arbitrators, we write to other law companies, we write to people on our clients' behalf. 70% of what a lawyer writes is usually intended to persuade. And that's how we achieve things. Now, lawyers tend to forget. Clients, although they're paying us possibly for our legal knowledge, they're paying us really to get things achieved. We manage to do things, and that's what they want. And we're doing it by writing. So really, lawyers are professional writers. Many lawyers forget that. You're being paid for your writing ability. So don't constantly practice it, constantly improve it. It's that moves you forward in the legal ranks. Now, I've just shown you a trick. The colon. Now, the thing is, it's a trick, right? Only people watching this lesson know about it. But because you found out about it, don't use it on every page, all right? This is where we've come to the chocolate milkshake test. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll bet at some time in your life, every person watching this lesson has had a chocolate milkshake. I'll also guess that it tasted great. I will make a further guess that the last thing you wanted immediately after you'd finished the chocolate milkshake was another chocolate milkshake. It's too rich. And that's the same with this trick. Don't use it on every page, it loses its impact. Put it in your memory, tuck it away, and save it for use maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks in a text where you got a chance to make a big point in a short few words. Whatever follows the colon has got to be short to give it dramatic effect. Tuck it away in your brain, remember it, and use it judiciously, sparingly, very, very occasionally. When you use it, it'll have a bigger impact. Okay. Right. Now, I want to deal with some legal vocabulary. I know legal vocabulary is difficult. And what's particularly difficult for non-native speakers of English, and native speakers as well, is legal phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are verbs of more than one word. But legal phrasal verbs are very idiomatic. So they're difficult for non-lawyer native speakers of English, but they're very difficult for non-native speakers who are lawyers, because it's so idiomatic. I'm going to run through about a dozen of them. We'll run through a few more later in the course. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of them. We cover this in detail in our legal writing course. I've just taken a short extract out of one of the lessons from the legal writing course to show you. They play an important role in legal terminology, and they're often used in a kind of semi-technical or quasi-technical sense. For example, the case was set down for trial. What do you mean set down? What we mean is it's listed in the court. It's set down for trial, or the parties entered into the contract. What do you mean they entered into it? It's a document. How can you go in it? Entered into means it's started. Contract is started. So you can see these phrases are rather confusing, but they play a very important role in standard English and especially in legal English. They're made up of a verb plus one or more particles. Now, these particles can either be an adverb or a preposition, or both an adverb and a preposition. And they then form a sort of idiomatic phrase which is completely different in meaning from the literal meaning of the separate words if they were used individually. The verbs used have their ordinary meaning when used without particles, but as phrasal verbs, they have literal or non-literal meanings. Their meanings change. For example, look at the verb to write. Well, we all know what that means. I take a pencil and I get a piece of paper and I write something down. Well, we understand to write. But what if I said I'm going to write off a debt? What does that mean? It means I'm going to release the person from paying the debt. That's a completely different meaning from off, and a completely different meaning from to write. So, unfortunately, phrasal verbs don't follow, as so many things in English, don't follow any rules of grammar. And therefore, the only way to learn them is by constant repetition, by rote, so that you memorize them. So the structure of phrasal verbs, it's either a verb or an adverb. For example, to log on or to log off your computer. I'm going to log on my computer. So the verb is to log, and the adverb is to log on or off. I'm going to log on, I'm going to log off. Or it's a verb plus a preposition. For example, I'm going to deal with a file. The verb is deal, and the preposition is with. I'm going to deal with a file, means I'm going to work on it. I'm going to do whatever work is required for that file. I'm going to deal with a file. Or sometimes we have a verb plus an adverb plus a preposition to make it exceptionally difficult. For example, to stand for. I'm not going to stand for this, meaning I refuse to accept it. What's standing up got to do with it? Would you stand for this? Meaning, will you accept it? The verb is to stand, and the preposition is for this, or stand up for. So the adverb is up, and the preposition is for. He stood up for me, meaning he defended me. To stand up for something means to defend it. Like a lawyer getting up on his feet in court or her feet in court to argue on behalf of their client, to stand up for them. So in a phrasal verb structure, it's always very important to know where to place the object, because depending on whether it should go before or after the particle will affect the meaning. And this is further complicated in cases where there are two particles, or the object itself is a pronoun. Let me show you. Well, I'm going to show you by giving you about 10 or 12 of the most common examples you're going to come across. Many of these can be used in official documents and in ordinary English as well. To abide by means to accept and obey a decision or a law. For example, the parties must agree to abide by the terms of the agreement. Or to accede to. This means to agree to or allow something that someone's asked you for. You agree to it after you've opposed to it. So the company eventually acceded to the request. First of all, the company refused it, but then they said, yes, we'll do it. Or to account for. Now, this is very difficult because it's got 4 different meanings. I don't think it's a very good idea for you to use phrases which have multiple meanings, because it means the reader has to read the entire sentence to try and work out which meaning you intended. For example, to account for, first of all, means to explain why something has happened. For example, how do you account for the fact that you are not where you said you would be? I mean, explain it to me. Or second meaning, to be a particular part of something. For example, business-to-business sales account for 80% of the profits. So it's to be a particular part, it accounts for. Or the third meaning, to keep a record of how money in your care has been spent. For example, every penny in the fund has been accounted for. We've shown you how we spent it. Or number 4, to consider particular facts when you're making a decision about something, to take them into your consideration and think about them, such as the costs of a potential lawsuit were accounted for when calculating the amount of money to be paid. We thought about it and working out how much money we'd pay. Or to account to. Well, this means something totally different. To account to means to make a payment to somebody, together with a calculation of how the actual amount you've paid is comprised or made up. For example, the lawyer accounted to the client for damages received. To adhere to means to act in a way that a particular rule or law or set of instructions says that you should. For example, the parties must strictly adhere to the terms of this agreement. And to amount to. To amount to means, well, 2 different things. It means to either add up to something or to be equal to something. Very big difference. Let's have a look at to add up to something. Here's an example. The overall costs amounted to well over £75,000. Here's to be equal to something. This amounted to a breach of the contract. In other words, this was the same as or equaled a breach of contract. Big difference. And breakdown. Well, 2 meanings again. Idiomatic English really means the machine has stopped working. Something has stopped working, to fail. For example, it can mean to separate something into different parts to make it easier to deal with, such as, let me break this down into more understandable figures. So I'll show you what each figure means. Or to fail in something. Negotiations between the various factions have broken down. And break down, what about break off? Different meaning. It means to stop speaking or to stop doing something before you finish speaking or before you finish doing it. For example, we had to break off the meeting. It wasn't finished, we had to stop early. Or to break up. What does that mean? Well, it means several things again. Splitting up of a company or organization into separate parts, for example. The company was broken up into smaller concerns. Or the splitting up of a group of people. For example, the conference broke up into discussion groups. To call in. Well, it can mean several things. It means can request the return of something. For example, the bank has decided to call in all our loans. Or second meaning, to visit a place or person for a short time. For example, he called in before going to court this morning. And to carry on. Apart from the idiomatic expression, what a carry on, meaning this is terrible and completely disorganized, what a carry on, it also means to continue something. For example, the company intends to carry on as a going concern. Now contrast that with carry out, which means to perform a task, to do something that you said you would do or that you've been asked to do. For example, the solicitor carried out his client's instructions to a T. To carry out the instructions to a T means to perform exactly as you have been asked. To consist of means to be made up of something. The team consists of a number of footballers who play for top teams. To cover up means to try hard to stop people finding out a mistake or a crime. The president tried to cover up the indiscretions, but was found out in the end. And to deal in means to do business. It's how a company makes its money. For example, the company deals in pet food and other animal products, which means the company sells pet food. It deals in it. Very important in relation to contract law in regard to who is a merchant and who is not a merchant. What do you ordinarily deal in this type of product, which makes you a merchant? Oh, enter into, to begin or start an agreement, or to start with deal with something. For example, the company entered into negotiations with its supplier to reach a mutually acceptable agreement. And factor in, well, very strange. It means to take something into account when calculating or planning something, to factor it in. For example, the company needs to factor in its legal costs when preparing its end-of-year accounts. Right, I'm going to leave that. Now, as you might expect, there are hundreds of these terms. However, quite frankly, if you want to practice law in English, you're going to have to learn them. Now, as I said again, our legal English course will help you out with that. And we might try and have another lesson on this, or another section on another 10 or 15 in a later lesson. Now, let's have a little exercise. Here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 phrasal verbs. And here are 8 spaces in this slide and the next slide. Now, let's have a look at blank space number 1. Which of these phrasal verbs in its correct form, because you may have to change the verb tense, which of these phrasal verbs fits in sentence number 1? Now, it's not just finding the right phrasal verb, it's putting it in the correct verb tense as well, because it's been, so it's going to be put in the past tense. So the Company Act has been what into 7 autonomous decisions? You write your answers in the chat box for me. Good, I can see you're answering. Yeah. Broken up. Excellent, Munir, Genival, Aman. Amara, excellent. Broken up. Great. Great, Vincent, Monia, excellent. Okay. Number 2. He had a factory which manufactured cheap sports clothes, which he... What did he do? He used to have it, so he doesn't have it anymore. That's a clue. Now, again, you have to put it in the past tense, because it's the past. So what did he do with it? Strange idiomatic phrase. So I'm going to, let's see who can get this, because I didn't deal with it in our lesson. Let's see who's got this. Okay, well, I'll be frank with you. And Apple Zheng, that's excellent. Where was he? He had a factory which manufactured cheap sports clothes, which he wound up. To wind up, believe it or not, doesn't mean to make things go. It means to close a company down. The company will be wound up. I'm going to wind up the company, meaning I'm not going to make it go, I'm going to close it down. Number 3, he what? Something. We've broken the phrasal verb up into 2 parts. One part, the main verb, goes in front of all of us, and the other part goes in afterwards. He, again, past tense, so you've got to change the tense. Let's give you a bit more time. It's quite a difficult one, in my opinion. Okay. Took all of us in. Well done, Emma. Took in, yes. Took all of us in. Gu-san, thank you very much. Hello to Korea. Yes, took all of us in. Tuka has taken all of us in. Oh, very good, Tuka. Very good. And Daniela has taken us in. Okay, great. Anna has took all of us in. Excellent. Okay, well done, everyone. What about the next? Here are the same words. We've already used some of them now. Here are some more. He was caught doing something to a clothes shop at night. I should say, my mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. It said at and night. It should say at night. This goes to show everybody makes mistakes, even native speakers. Okay. He was caught something to a clothes shop at night. Let's see what you've said. I'll give you another. Let's have a few more answers. A very idiomatic phrase. Let's have a look. Breaking in. Well done, everyone. Well done, Mania. Well done, Yakub. Kiara. Yeah. Breaking in. Very good. Very good. And what about number 5? Again, put it in the right tense. Right, let's see. 10, 11. Let's just see any more answers coming. 12. Great. Let's see who's got this right. I bet you all have. 13, 14. Now look, let me explain something. Don't worry about making mistakes. If you could do all this, that might help. I wouldn't have a job. Don't worry about making mistakes. In fact, be kind. Make mistakes. At least it makes me feel like I have a purpose for being here. Okay. Let's see what your answers are. Right. Well done, Kiara. So it's broke off, not broken off, broke off. I suppose you could also say wound up to end a meeting. Yeah. So yeah, he wound up the meeting with a vote of thanks to the chairman. He broke off the meeting with a vote of thanks to the chairman. Both are correct. He wound up the meeting, he broke off the meeting. Very good. Broke off would indicate that it hasn't finished yet. Number 6. I'm very busy on Wednesday. Can I what? Our meeting something to Tuesday. So busy Wednesday, let's have it a day earlier, Tuesday. So what am I asking you to do? I want you to, I bet you've all got this. Very good, Azada. Very good, Amen. Very good. Monia, Lesia, Amma. It is to bring forward. Can I bring our meeting forward to Tuesday? Okay. Right, well, I think that's everything I'm going to deal with today. Oh, no, I beg your pardon. Oh, here's some more. 3 more. John is leaving in June, and there'll be a gap of 1 month before the new manager. What? Same 8 phrases. Which one is it? Now, I want the right form of the phrase. I suggested, don't just type the right answer. You've got to put in the right form. You'll have to change it slightly. Let's have a look what we've got here. John is leaving in June, and there will be a gap of 1 month before the new manager takes over. Well done, Khaled. Well done, Yakub. Takes over. Very good. Yeah. Abu Bakr, thank you. Munir, very good. Monia, very good. Hissa, very good. Takes over. And number 8. Management and unions could not agree, and negotiations what? At midnight. Well, we weren't finished, so what did we do? We just gave up for a while. What would that be? Broke off. Yeah, break off is right. But it's got to put in the correct tense, as you have done, Omar. Good, Olena. Good, Gusi Yansi. Gu Yi San. Sorry, very small writing on my screen. Hani, very good. Broke off. Management and unions could not agree, and negotiations broke off at midnight yesterday. Don't forget it's the past tense, because it's what happened yesterday. Now, what's this? This is the future. Payment will be something until the contract is signed. Let's see how we're doing here. It's much more interesting for me when you all try and answer, because otherwise I'm just lecturing to a computer screen. It's not so exciting. Let's see what you've said. 18 of you answered. Let's just see if we can get up to 20. 19. 20. Excellent. 21. Held up. Well done, Marina. Yeah. Held up. Well done. So it's to hold up. So, but it's the present tense. So we held up. Held up. Because we're talking about the future. Payment will be held up. To hold is the present tense. It will be held means a reference to the future tense. Held up. Very good, everyone who's got that. Very good, Azada. Very, very good, Guyi-san. Very good. All right. Well, that's really all for today, okay? Now, a personal request from me, okay? It's very disturbing, and not disturbing, it's very distracting for people who've taken the trouble to come on time when people come late. And I've had to stop, interrupt the lesson continually to let latecomers come into the lesson. Please, on Friday, when we have another lesson, please, everybody try and be there 5 minutes before the lesson or 2 minutes before the lesson. But please try not to come late. I have to break off what I'm doing, and it's distracting, and it's not really polite for the other people who are in the lesson. So I'm not telling anybody off, but next Friday, on Friday of this week, let's everybody try to be on time, okay? Thank you very much, everyone. At our next lesson, I'll tell you about the book I mentioned in our last lesson. We'll see if we can find a way to get this to you. I'll work it out over the next week or so. Let's have a look at your messages. That's great. Well, Omar has asked me a question. Could you suggest any source for making strong arguments and persuasive submissions? Well, I can suggest 2 things. I suggest you take our persuasive writing course of 10 lessons, which is all for litigators and arbitrators. Otherwise, if you want to take a textbook on it, there's an excellent textbook by a very famous American lawyer called Ross Guberman, entitled Point Made: How to Write Like the Nation's Top Advocates. It's not bad, but it's an entire textbook, whereas our little course of persuasive writing teaches you tricks as well as power words and other things that Mr. Guberman deals with. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, Manya, for your kind words. Thank you very much, Amma. That's very nice of you to say that. Thank you. I don't know if it was a fantastic lesson, Amma, but it was very nice to have you. Thank you very much. Any other questions for me to answer? Hani has asked me, I look forward to improve my legal English. I started with tolls. What's the next step? Well, the next step basically is to take further lessons and to practice more, Hani. The point is, you can pass an exam, you can take courses, but you've got to keep it going. You've got to practice constantly. If you really want to take your next step, I would, and I don't want to give people a hard sell here, I'd really suggest you look at our legal writing course or our persuasive writing course, or maybe the full legal English course of 60 lessons of about 10 to 12 minutes each. And Daniela is quite right. Daniela says, I passed tolls advanced, but I'm still learning. Everybody is. Daniela, Charles Dickens, when he wrote his first novel, The Pickwick Papers, wrote an excellent book. It's very amusing and it's really well written. But 20 years later, when he came to write Bleak House, he'd improved as a writer. You know, if Charles Dickens can improve, we can always improve. Improving your writing is a lifelong endeavor. You don't just do it in 6 months over a course. It's something you do throughout your entire professional career. Just keep practicing. Could you please clarify the difference between colon and semicolon? Okay, from moderator. Okay, right. Well, a semicolon is more than a comma and less than a full stop. A semicolon would be used when you're writing about the same topic in a sentence, but the phrase doesn't flow easily from the phrase in front. Whereas a colon is a giant dramatic stop for breath, where the colon acts as an arrow pointing to the information which follows it, which explains something about the information in the sentence in front of the colon. A colon can only be used at the end of a sentence. Semicolon can be used in a sentence. Hani has asked, sorry for asking again, but my aim is to go for QLTS. Full legal English will be my guide, right? Well, to pass QLTS, you must speak English virtually the same as a native speaker of English. So if you're asking me, do you need to know legal English? Yes, you do. More than we're dealing with in this free course. This time I am going to advise you. Have a serious think about taking the full legal English course from our website. It's a paid course, but we're giving a discount of 20% during this Corona period, so you'll never get it at a better price. And if you want to, you can join live lessons. We're starting a new group for the Middle East at the end of the month. I'll tell you about that in the lesson on Friday. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to see you again. Now, please, for Friday, everybody try to be on time. Okay, see you soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.